Hello and welcome. Aquarister here, coming to you with another video, and today we are going to be looking at consumables, potions, coatings, stuff like that, things that we need to consume, whether that be for PvE or PvP content. So let's first take a look at the kitchen here, see as far as craftables, what's available, and then we'll see what we can also purchase for some of these consumables. All right, so taking a look first at the kitchen here, we have our basic recovery foods. So as a 60, you'll be using the highest tier of these foods all the way, starting at light ration all the way up to hearty meal. Hearty meal is what we end up using as a 60, the top tier. So with the hearty meal, you do get a recovery of 220 health per second for 20 seconds, as well as you recover 1% of your health every 2.5 seconds for 40 minutes. So really, really good health food. It's going to allow you to regain health over time and kind of save on some potion cooldowns if need be. The other one is the Energizing Hearty Meal, which increases your mana regen rate by 30% for 40 minutes. Now, in the past, Energizing Hearty Meals used to actually not interact well with the Hearty Meals. Like if you were to take an Energizing Hearty and then take a Hearty Meal, it would almost like remove the energizing buff, so you wouldn't get the mana regen. They have since changed that or fixed it. It might have just been a UI bug before, but it definitely seemed like it was removing it. So now these two meals can be used together. So you can take an energizing hearty meal, and then let's say you need to take a hearty meal to regain a little bit of health. You can do that and still keep that mana regen rate. So really, really good food to have, and honestly, really easy to make. Otherwise, if you do a lot of chest runs, like you'll end up pulling a good amount of hearty and energizing hearty just from chest runs. So those are kind of your basic recovery foods. Health and mana regen. Compound ingredients are going to go into some of the meals that we're looking at here. So first we're going to look at the defense recovery food, which is the Desert Sunrise. We did do a video a while back on the Desert Sunrise, kind of what it was and what it did. But now they actually introduced the higher tiers of it. Before there was only one tier. Now they have the higher tiers. So I actually own the tier 4, which ends up giving you a 15% reduction of duration of dot damage or dot effects in general. So really nice. It's like having a stack and a half of vigor for 35 minutes. So really, really nice consumable. I run it all the time in OPR especially. Not so much in the PvE side of things. There are some other consumables that I take kind of instead of it. But for PvP, for sure, I'm using the Desert Sunrise. Taking a look first at strength foods, there's obviously a lot of options. I end up going with the carrot cake. The carrot cake is a very inexpensive meal to make. You can either buy or go out and farm the ingredients pretty easily. It doesn't take too long. And then you do get 40 attribute points total. So you get 24 in strength, 16 in con. Which for most strength builds that I'm doing, at least I know I have enough con, so I can manage to not go over my con amount between the armor and the consumable. Next we have the dex foods. For the dex foods, personally, I would probably go towards the rabbit stew again if I have the extra con to spare. If I'm really tight on con or trying to run a 5 con build or something like that, I'm not going to be running a con food of any sorts. Most of the time, though, I have up to like 50 con, so something like this would work just fine. The most expensive part is the sumptuous rabbit meat. Since that rabbit meat goes into other consumables, it does end up bringing the cost up a bit, but full skinning luck, you might be able to farm it up pretty easily. So that would be the meal that I would recommend for Dex. For Int, similar deal. We're going to go with an Int con food, the glazed bear with sauteed vegetables. And the nice thing with that is the most expensive part is the rich bear flank and then the cauliflower. Cauliflower, you can either buy or go out and farm. There's some pretty good routes out there that people do in order to farm up cauliflower, since you do have to farm it out of provisions, crates, and stockpiles. But rich bear flank, same deal. Put on that skinning luck, go over to Evanscale, farm up a bunch of bears, and I bet you'll be sitting pretty good on the rich bear flank. But again, For int, that's the route that I go because the 40 int is very, very expensive utilizing the legendary fish, and fish sauce is very expensive currently. The fish roe and all that gets to just add up to be a lot. So that's why I end up going with the int con food. For focus, being a healer that I am, if I end up going with a food that has some focus on it, it's almost always going to be the slow roasted bear flank with root vegetables. Again, very inexpensive to make. It's just the rich bear flank is like the most expensive part. The rest of that's pretty easy to farm up or buy. And then same deal as the int food, you're getting 24 focus, 16 con, which most of my healer builds I can afford to use that much con, so it's not normally a problem. So that is the focus. And then for con foods, I still just go with the good old classic roasted rabbit with seasoned vegetables. Most expensive parts are the sumptuous rabbit and the cauliflower. Again, cauliflower you can go out and farm through provisions runs and stuff like that. And then the rabbit, same deal. Go out, skinning luck, get them skinned up, and you'll get some rabbit meat. So that is what I end up using for my 40 con foods. Now, as far as trade skills go, more the PvE side of things, you do have different consumables that will actually increase your luck when you are farming. So you have like your logging, your skinning, all that stuff. So you have the different luck foods, and then you also have your crafting foods, which increases your gear score by 15% or by 15 points when you are crafting them. So like these consumables, if you want to craft 600 gear score items, you absolutely are going to have. They are consumables where a lot of people do just buy them because they're pretty cheap to make and pretty cheap to buy. I sometimes make them if I happen to be crafting other stuff, then I'll make them. If I just need a few just to do some crafting, then I'll just buy them. Not too big of a deal. So that is kind of the kitchen and a lot of the foods. Obviously, you have the dyes as well. We're not going to get into that. Both those are kind of your more standard foods that are available to craft, I suppose. But next, let's head over to the trading post and take a look at some of the event foods that I like to run. All right, taking a look at the trading post here, we're going to go under consumables, and under consumables, you will see event consumables. So that is where we're going to be looking. Under the event consumables, you will see all these different types of foods. Now, those who have played the events probably know some of these different consumables and what they are. But let's look at the top one here. So this is from the Summer Medley Fair of 2022. 33 con for 25 minutes is what you end up getting from this food. It's really not a bad deal. So that's $15 for 33 con for 25 minutes, right? So you do miss out on some of the time from the higher tier, and you miss out 7 attribute points, which again, for a lot of the PvE and even some of the PvP content that I like, that's plenty. I mean, like, I don't end up needing the extra 7 when I'm already at, 300, 400 something attribute. I don't necessarily need to add the extra 7 and notice like a huge difference, but sometimes the 7 attributes will allow you to get to certain perks within that attribute. So 40 attribute food, still very, very useful. This is just significantly cheaper, and they do have all the different types. So you have your int, con, strength, dex, focus, all that stuff. You're good to go. But when we take a look at this, so we're taking a look at these. We have the 33 con for $15 a pop, right? Next, we're going to look at the roasted rabbit. So these are about $60 for 40 con. So for 2 of the other ones, so let's say the average on the other ones, let's say we'll bump it up to $20 average on the other event con food. You buy 2 of those and you end up getting 33 con for 50 minutes, and it still leaves you with $20 left over. So from a cost saving standpoint, I do recommend the event consumables. If you have your cooking level up and you're willing to go out and farm this stuff, then I would highly recommend the 40 attribute foods. Just because getting the extra time and extra attributes is really nice, but you just need to obviously make sure you can afford it and make sure it works for you and your use. Because I always hate to take like a 40 attribute food and then the thing that I took it for lasted for like 10 minutes and now it's like on to the next thing. So stuff like that where I know I'm not necessarily going to need it, then I end up going that route. Um, so that is the event consumables. Like I said, you can find it in the trading post. Prices normally are not terribly expensive because a lot of people just got the consumables for free. But sometimes they do kind of sell down a bit, and then prices can get a little bit higher, but it's still a bit cheaper than the 40 attribute version of it. Next, let's take a look at the outfitting station to see some Oakflesh Balm and Gemstone Dust. All right, so over here at the outfitting station, we're going to be looking at Gemstone Dust and Oakflesh Balm. Now, these are kind of some consumables that I personally didn't use for the longest time. I didn't really know a whole lot about them until some people started telling me, like, hey, you should try using this just to see how it works. And I did notice a difference, and it was quite nice. It does kind of get you out of some sticky situations, both PvE and PvP, actually. So taking a look first at the gemstone dust, you can see in order to make them, you actually need pristine gems. As you go down in quality, then also goes down in quality in the gems that you need. But for the powerful, what you end up getting is it increases your damage or your absorption of elemental damage types by 35% for 20 seconds or until any damage is received 15 times. So it's a short burst of resistance, but it does increase your elemental resistance by a whole bunch, which can get you out of some situations in like OPRs or arenas, or even in like a mutated dungeon. I like to bring gemstone dust for mutated dungeons because it allows me to remove some of the mutated or not remove, but it helps prevent some of the mutated elemental damage that you might receive. So that is the gemstone dust. Do recommend having some of it. I know it's a little bit expensive to make depending on how many gems you're sitting on, but it is worth it to have some. The other one is the Oakflesh Balm. So Oakflesh Balm essentially is the same thing as the gemstone dust, but it is for physical damage as opposed to the elemental damage. Same exact effects though, as far as how it works. And then obviously the cost is going to be a bit different. So similar to the other, for the powerful gemstone dust, the powerful Oakflesh is a little bit expensive, but luckily earth and water motes are not too bad to farm up. And then oil is obviously pretty easy as well. So same deal though, but physical damage. Really, really good to have. Certain situations you might end up using them. So I do recommend having both of those items with you at least. And some situations, like I said, you might end up using one or the other more than not. But next, let's hop on over to the forge and take a look at some honing stones. Okay, so over here at the forge, we have honing stones, which a lot of you might know what the honing stones are or have seen them. But what they do is they increase your weapon damage by a percentage depending on what tier it is. So at the lowest tier, you have a 4% buff for only 25 minutes, but it is really, really cheap to make them. Just a stone block, death mode, fire mode. Really, really cheap. Personally, I use the strong honing stones because the death essence, fire essence, and lodestone brick aren't terrible to farm up. It gets to be a little bit expensive when you're crafting a few hundred, but overall, it's not that expensive compared to the powerful. And if you look, we increase weapon damage by 6% for 35 minutes. So that's a pretty solid buff for a decently long time. The powerful honing stone, really what we get is a 7% buff for 40 minutes, but the cost is significantly more expensive. So I do have some on hand in case we need just a little extra damage. But overall, I would say you're pretty safe with using the strong honing stones if you can't afford to do the powerfuls. But honing stones, PvE, PvP, really, really good to have. I use them all the time. Dungeons or for OPRs, anything like that, I'm using honing stone. So one I definitely recommend. You do need fairly high weaponsmithing in order to make some of them, but you also can buy them if you want to go that route as well. So next, let's hop on over to the workshop though and look at a couple of more PvE style consumables. All right, so the next two that we'll be looking at are the Incense and Proficiency boosters. So with the Incense, it is actually a very, very useful PvE consumable. So what it does is it increases your resistance to all afflictions by 50 for 30 minutes for the powerful. And what that essentially means is You know how there is like a blight resistance, corruption resistance, and then even now with brimstone, there's an acid resistance. Those are all considered afflictions. And so by taking a powerful incense, you're actually raising your resistance to blight, resistance to corruption, resistance to acid, even. So what I do is I use the incense when I go out on my acid pool runs. I'll pop an incense because it allows you to stand in the acid just a little bit longer because it increases your resistance by another 50. So it's a good amount of extra resistance to be able to go into the acid and kind of do your thing. And try not to die getting out of it. But powerful incense, do highly recommend. I do use them in some dungeons, like for Genesis. I like running it as opposed to the dot food. But the thing is your incense and your desert sunrise will conflict with each other. So it's a one or the other. Don't use both because whatever one you use last will end up taking it over. So it is a one or other type of a deal. So that's where some dungeons I'll use the dots and some dungeons I'll use the incense. It just kind of depends on what I'm doing. The other one is the proficiency booster. This one's pretty straightforward. It just increases the amount of resources gathered with a tool by a certain percentage for a certain time, depending on the strength that you have. Now, I have tried stacking this with the music buff that also gives you a 10% bonus, and it seemed like I was getting more. I guess I can't 100% confirm that they do stack, but it definitely seemed like they were stacking, because I would say I noticed a good amount of more extra resources when I went out. So that is one route you can go, though, is take that proficiency booster and then also do a music buff and get a bit extra harvesting out of it. So that is the incense and the proficiency booster. And the last thing we are going to go look at are potions and coatings. So many of you probably know the various potions. We have the health potion, mana potion, regen, focus, encumbrance for like the main potions here. The regen potion, for those who don't know, you can actually get a perk on your earring that allows you to have purifying toast. And what purifying toast does is when you consume a regen potion, it will actually remove one debuff from you. So I like using it. I like using purifying toast a lot. Others might say otherwise, but I enjoy it. But I do burn through a lot of regen potions. Focus potions I don't really use, even as a mage and as a healer. I never really used them. Energizing hearty meals plus some other perks on your jewelry, and you can get pretty good mana regen. And honestly, I don't like taking up a hotbar slot with a focus potion. So personally, I don't use them. If you do use them and have a specific application, please let me know in the comments so I can take a look at it and get an idea. But currently, I'm not using them really at all. And then the encumbrance potion, pretty straightforward, increases your encumbrance by a bit and allows you to just carry more, and you can stack that with the music buff as well that increases carry weight. Next is going to be coatings. So there are various coatings for the different enemy types. And if you're into PvE, especially dungeons and stuff, I do highly recommend bringing coatings with you. It does increase your damage output against the enemy, so there's really no reason why you wouldn't want to do that, I guess. But yeah, so coatings really good to have, especially for mutated and stuff, just so you can burn through the ads a bit quicker. And they're really not too expensive to make. I don't think the cost is too expensive to buy either, but if you have someone who can make them, just craft up a whole bunch and then you'll be set to go for a while. So that should be good for the coatings. And then the last of the consumables here that we'll go over are the resistance consumables. Now, I don't really use any of the ward potions or any of the tinctures outside of a blight tincture. I try to carry those with me just in case something happens and I get blighted. Blight is just the worst. I hate it. I mean, they have, fire absorption, stuff like that, but if you're using gemstone dust and all that, I mean, you can still obviously get a good amount of absorption utilizing these other ones. I just personally haven't ever really used them because typically I'm not taking enough constant damage to justify it. Whereas usually when I need the resistance, it's for a short burst of time, which the gemstone dust helps with. But if you have various applications for these as well, please let me know, because I'm very interested to see if people are using some of these like fire absorption potions and stuff like that. I usually run ward gear, so I don't worry about like ward potions either. So I'm really curious if people are using that. But that is kind of it for the potions and the coatings as far as what I use and what I would recommend. All right, that is gonna do it for this one. So I hope this video kind of clarified some of the consumables that are out there, or just some of your options that are available, and kind of what route you can go with it. If you did like the video, please drop a like and subscribe. It does really help me out a lot, and I do appreciate it. I do stream throughout the week on Twitch, so you're more than welcome to stop by. We would love to have you in a stream. We do have a lot of fun there, work on builds, go for loot, and just kind of hang out and have a good time. So we would love to have you. You are more than welcome to stop by whenever. But that is going to do it for me for this one. So until next time, I'll see you guys later.